So hello everybody, good afternoon and welcome to this Innovatrix live webinar. This session is focusing on remote customer onboarding with Arabic ID document OCR. My name is Donal Greene. I'm from the Digital Onboarding Toolkit product team at Innovatrix, and I'm very happy to be joined by our CEO, CTO and co-founder Jan Lunter. Jan will take us through some of the technical aspects of how we've adapted our OCR technology, which is optical character recognition, to be able to work with Arabic script and documents which contain both Arabic and Latin characters. Before we start, I'd like to just do some housekeeping. We'd like to keep this session as interactive as possible. So you'll notice on the bottom of your Zoom panel, there's a Q&A. We'd love to get your questions. Please use it as much as you'd like. If the questions are relevant to the part of the discussion that we're covering, I'll try to segue them in at the appropriate points. If we don't manage to answer them during the presentation, we'll come to them at the end. So feel free, ask us as many questions as you like. If we don't answer them in the session at all, we'll then email you an answer directly afterwards. Additionally, this session will be recorded, so if you missed some of it, or you'd like to share it with your colleagues afterwards, we will have it sent to you by email straight away after the session. The first thing we like to begin with is to get you using one of the functions of Zoom. It's the poll function. As this session covers Arabic script mainly, we'd like to ask you an interesting question. So you should see the poll on your screen now. The question we're going to ask you is, how many symbols exist in the Arabic script? So if you know the answer or you'd like to take a guess, you can feel free. There are 4 possible options. So is it 28? Is it more than 150? Is it 100? Or is there no exact answer? So please take just 30 seconds now. We'll give you a gap to tip or guess your answer, or maybe you know the exact answer. And we'll come back to this then in the middle of the session, and Jana will explain how maybe the answer is not so simple as you might think. Okay, so if you've had a chance to give your answer, last 5 seconds, we'll move directly into the presentation. Just one slide in terms of background about Innovatrix. You may be familiar with us, you may not be. We're a biometric technology company based here in Bratislava in Slovakia. We've been around since 2004. We started out, of course, with fingerprint biometrics and then moved in recent years into face, iris biometrics, and also things like optical character recognition algorithms. To date, since we've been founded, we've managed to complete successfully over 500 projects in 80 countries. We currently employ more than 150 people. And a very interesting statistic from our projects is that more than 1 billion people globally have been enrolled and processed using our technology. Although we're based in Slovakia, we do have a research and development center in Brno in Czech Republic. And we also like to support our clients by being close to them. So we have offices in the USA, in Brazil, in Taiwan, and in Singapore. We focus mainly, as I said, on biometric technology, and we categorize this technology into 4 main products. Our flagship product for many years has been our ABIS. It's our automated biometric identity system. It's for large-scale systems for identifying up to hundreds of millions of people in real time against biometric databases. This can consist of fingerprint, face, iris, or additional biometric modalities. This ABIS product traditionally was focused more on government use cases, but in recent years, it's also been adopted by enterprises for things like remote customer identification, authentication, and onboarding. Our second product is called SmartFace. SmartFace is a facial recognition platform which works with CCTV cameras and live streams. And it's capable of, in real time, identifying people from video streams against either small or very large databases. Our third is more of a supporting product. It's our OEM solutions. And these are where we adapt our biometric algorithms and provide them to OEM hardware developers, and they can install and integrate these algorithms into their solutions. So this could be fingerprint sensors or cameras or things like that. And finally, I'll talk more about this product because this is the main focus of this session. It's our digital onboarding toolkit. It's one of our newer products. We've had it on our suite for about 3 years or 4 years now. And this is focused on real-time identity verification fully remotely where users can prove who they are using their identity card and a selfie, usually from their mobile device, but also from web environments. So to lead into this session, I'd like to just share one quote. And of course, this relates to maybe what's happened in the most recent 18 months, probably, in terms of the COVID pandemic. And this is, of course, relevant to biometrics. There are decades where nothing happens, and there are weeks when decades happen. And I think in our industry, I think Jana will agree, we've seen, in terms of digital onboarding, remote identity verification, a huge tornado of interest in the last 18 months, where organizations have been forced to be able to identify or prove the identity of people they do business with and establish trust with them in real time and fully remotely. If you think about how you open your bank account, traditionally for decades, literally, you went to the bank, you showed your ID card, you gave some documentation, and they verified your identity face to face. Now, with the pandemic and with the way things are moving, we need to be able to fully identify people fully remotely. Some interesting statistics from the US can back this up. This is from last year, and this relates to e-commerce penetration as a percentage of overall retail sales. As you can see, for the decade of 2009 till 2019, this was rising very steadily, steady, predictable growth. And then, of course, around February, March 2019, everything changed. And in that 8-week period, we saw a huge increase in the amount of e-commerce being used or being representing overall retail sales. And what that means for businesses in the US, their predicted spend versus actual online spend, there was a $52 billion difference. And that's just from the USA. So I think this is maybe symptomatic of what's happened across multiple industries, and of course, not just in the USA. We're now seeing a huge movement of customers to online channels. And that's the same whether you're applying for an e-visa, you're applying to renew your passport, or indeed you're applying to open a bank account or an account on a ride-sharing platform or something like that. So what this means, in our opinion, as identity verification technology providers, is that while maybe in this last decade, the idea of remotely identifying or verifying the identity of your customers was something like a nice to have aspirational vision, we believe that today, or even in the last 6 months, this is now a mission critical value generator. This is something that organizations must have in place. It must work, it must be reliable, and it must be secure. With that in mind, I did mention we have 4 products, and Digital Onboarding Toolkit is the one we mentioned today. Digital Onboarding Toolkit is aimed at identity verification online, fully remotely, and it's a full technology stack for system integrators, platform developers, and in some cases, end customers to use, to integrate into their applications and to provide seamless customer identification and onboarding fully online. We launched this product in late 2017, so this was way before the pandemic. And so far, we've had very nice uptake from some very well-known organizations around the world. Some of those I mentioned are Home Credit, for example, who have a consumer finance business in 10 countries with more than 100 million customers. O2 and Vodafone, of course, the global leaders in telco. And Erste Group, which is a Central European bank, one of the largest retail banks in Central Europe. Digital Onboarding Toolkit for customers is very simple. It's simply take a picture of your ID card and take a selfie. But of course, behind that, there's a lot of technology working in the background. The 3 main parts of that are the identity data validation, so actually extracting the data from the ID card and making sure it's correct and accurate. Face verification, when a user takes a selfie, we need to make sure it's the same person present on the ID document who is present in the selfie. And one of the more challenging and interesting ones has been the liveness check. So how do you know that I'm not taking somebody else's ID card and taking a photograph of them and onboarding fraudulently as them? So we've adopted some interesting and innovative technology to do what's called liveness detection. And of course, with these things, we can then integrate into larger risk management systems of banks, of financial institutions, of telcos, and insurance companies. As I mentioned at the beginning, this will focus mainly on one part of our technology, and that's optical character recognition, or OCR. We were challenged by our customers when we were providing facial verification technology that they wanted a little bit more. They wanted to be able to read the data from ID documents accurately and fast. So I'd like to maybe ask Jana to come in on this first question. Jano, we were asked by our customers to provide OCR technology. Why did you feel we shouldn't just integrate some of the many SDKs available on the market for OCR? Why did you decide we needed to develop our own technology?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. So as you mentioned, we were doing biometrics and focusing on facial verification and liveness check, either checking whether the document photo is authentic or checking whether the facial photo is authentic. And our customers challenged us. They wanted a complete solution, not only having those two parts, but for them it was not easy to find a good OCR solution and integrate it with our toolkit. So we looked at the situation on the market and we tried to evaluate OCR systems and find the right one. But unfortunately, we didn't find a good one, or the one that would be good enough for our use case. Because recognizing characters in documents can be very challenging, and I will explain why. Very often you deal with very old documents with fonts that are already obsolete, and traditional OCR systems will not work 100% in those atypical cases. So as we were experts in image processing and artificial intelligence, we decided, okay, maybe it's time to design our own OCR system. And if you have a look at what the real life brings, you can see very fast that there is no one size fits all solution. In some documents, here, for example, the first document you see on your screen is a document from Vietnam, and it's an old one from the last century. And they were using typewriter, and so those fonts are can be very difficult to read, and the standard OCR will just will completely fail on this kind of font. Also, sometimes you have a mix-up of the stamp can go through the text, label can be very close to the actual text you want to see. And if you don't tune your OCR, if you are not able to tune your OCR, you will recognize a gibberish. You will not recognize what you want to recognize. The third example, it shows the number 24, but it's not placed correctly. And unfortunately, the real life brings, there are not only high quality ID documents, but there are many documents that are still valid, that people use, and that are produced in some way that is not 100% correct, that has mistakes, human error, or it was like from last century, so it looks like it looks. Mm-hmm. Sometimes they are using stamps for document ID, so you have many surprising situations and you have to tune your system for these kind of situations. Mm-hmm. Also, we are from Central Europe, so we are using the critics, we are using accents, and you can see an example here. And this is a Slovak name, Tomáš, and there is an accent there. But when we tried it with a competing solution, it just didn't recognize accents correctly, because many systems are built with the assumption that there is only standard Latin characters and no diacritics, or if they recognize those accents, it does not work very well because it was only added at the end and it was not maybe tested properly. Mm-hmm. Another situation when having an in-house OCR solution is very beneficial is if you have documents, and this one is this is a snapshot from a crop from a document from a Texas driver's license, and you can see that they are using non-standard characters, the symbols like greater than. These are not symbols you will encounter very often, and maybe some OCR systems will just not recognize them, and you have to be able to react and to support your customer even in such a situation. Mm-hmm. Another difficult case is bounding boxes. Okay, so this is another category, and if you use just the standard, and of course we tried those, and there is an open source solution called Tesseract. We tried those, we tried to evaluate them, but it just didn't work. And when you see those bounding boxes, so it was recognizing letter L where the bounding box is located, and we had then to artificially remove it, and it just didn't work, so it didn't pass our QA test.
So essentially, what was available on the market wasn't good enough for identity document verification, so we decided to go our own path to develop our own technology.
Yes, the domain of a document or OCR in the document the identification is very broad. You have a lot of different fonts. Sometimes those documents are old, they have artifacts, so it's not very easy to be recognized by one solution, and very often you have to tune the technology for the given document.
Specific documents, okay.
The way we do it is first we identify the font, and we generate so-called font card, and you can see an example here. So the top row is this is a snapshot from a real document from a Polish ID card, and then other rows are the best fitting fonts that we will use for training of the recognizer.
So with each different document, it's not just that you can have one set of fonts, you can have multiple or even dozens of different fonts that could theoretically be present on a document, right?
Correct. We have seen documents with more than 10 fonts used on this document at the same time. Sometimes some documents are more standardized and they have MRZ zone, so this can be just standard models, but very often a customization is needed.
Okay. So we developed our technology. Of course, the accuracy is very important, that it's able to read the documents accurately, but maybe for real world use cases, accuracy is not enough. It's also about performance, right?
Yes, the benefit of using Innovatric is you have everything under control. The technology is fully ours. We don't use third-party components, and we are able to adapt the technology for different use cases. Of course, an OCR solution has to be very fast. It has to work on a mobile phone. That means at the same time the model has to be small. You don't have enough bandwidth to download megabytes. It has to be kilobytes. It has to be fast. It has to be mobile friendly, and it has to work in offline mode. So these were the challenges, and that's the reason why we wanted to develop our own OCR.
Okay. So I'm thinking back to when we initially rolled this out to our customers. It would have been late 2017 and 2018 when this started to get traction in the market. And of course, the documents we focused on first were probably the majority of documents in the world which have only Latin or a combination of Latin and local script.
Correct.
Right. But I remember during my time in the sales team, our sales director, Peter Martish, approached us with a very specific challenge. He mentioned that we had a partner in the Middle East who was interested in integrating our technology into a very interesting use case. But one of the conditions was that we needed to be able to recognize Arabic script on documents, because many documents in the Middle East have both Arabic and Latin, and also some have only Latin or only Arabic, sorry, if I'm not mistaken. And I even think Peter really challenged us. He was interested to see if we could manage to do this.
Challenge is one of our values.
Challenges are core values. Yeah. And there was also a kind of bounty put up by Peter, right? If I'm not.
Yes, you are right.
Yeah. So
I think he mentioned, or he wanted to give the technical team 12 bottles of champagne, and we have never seen them, even though we have developed.
So Peter owes us 12 bottles of champagne for overcoming this challenge. I think we'll have to reach out to him to follow up on that. These were the documents. Just an example. These are from the openly available Prado database of some documents from countries like Iraq and Saudi Arabia and Egypt, which are common examples of documents in the Middle East, where you have a mixture of Latin and Arabic. But of course, you can see on these documents, the majority of the key info is in Arabic. So we need to be able to read this accurately. And I guess, Jano, that dealing with Arabic is not the same as dealing with Latin. Could you maybe explain to us some of the specific challenges around Latin Arabic script that comes with training OCR, which is not present with Latin or other types of scripts?
Of course. Okay, so a little bit of theory first. So the typical way how you do optical character recognition is first you find bounding boxes or the boxes around the different symbols, and then you detect which letter is inside each symbol. So this is the typical way how OCR is typically done. However, it completely fails with Arabic. The reason is very simple. In Arabic script looks a little bit more like handwritten text, and you don't really see where the symbol starts and where it ends. So this is the first thing. The second thing, and here you see an Arabic word group, and so this is one way how you will see it in the real life. But sometimes it can look completely different. And instead of and you see in the middle there are 3 letters. And okay, they are joined together, but if you read Arabic, it's very easy to read. But sometimes instead of writing those 3 letters, one can write just so-called a ligature. So it replaces those 3 letters. And again, it's like a new symbol that you need to be able to recognize, and you need to be able to understand that these are 3 symbols and return it as 3 separate symbols. Another situation which is difficult and that exists with Arabic and is not encountered with Latin is those overlapped symbols. Like 2 symbols can be really close to each other, and you need a different way how to do it. So we had to redesign our OCR engine, and now instead of recognizing characters, we are recognizing whole words at the same time. And so it was a challenge.
Okay. And speaking of characters and symbols, we asked a question at the beginning of the session. We asked our audience to participate in a poll. We know that in our Latin alphabet we have 26 letters. In Slovak we have some additional ones because they also count the ones with the accents on them as additional letters. So we have our poll answered. How many symbols exist in the Arabic script? So very nice response, and it's actually very evenly spread, okay, but the most common answer is 28. So that's actually quite similar to Latin, right? So that would make it seem that it's quite easy. If Latin is easy on 26 letters, then surely Arabic with 28 should be the same. Although some people have voted for more than 150, that's quite a difference from 28. And also about a quarter of people have said there's no exact answer. So, Jano, in your opinion, is there an exact answer? How many symbols exist in the Arabic script, or does it really depend on the situation?
Well, I would say that everyone is right in this answer. Nobody answered 100 symbols, yes. And that's the only incorrect answer. All other answers are correct. So, okay, but technically speaking, and Wikipedia tells it, Arabic alphabet has 28 symbols, letters. Okay, technically speaking, it's correct. However, in a real life solution, it just does not stand. It's different. And why? First, the way how a letter looks like in Arabic it really depends on the context. It depends on the surrounding letters. And Arabic letters can have up to 4 different forms. So-called final, medial, initial, isolated. So it roughly multiplies your 28 letters by a factor of 3 or 4, depends. Then another, and I have mentioned already ligatures, so these are like extra symbols. So these are symbols that you will not find in the 28 letters alphabet, but we still have to recognize them. So in total, we did the count, and in our system, in a typical document, we recognize more than 150 different symbols, and we have to recognize more than 150 differently looking symbols.
Okay.
So maybe the most correct answer is more than 150.
Okay. And of course, details matter. And as you can see here, there's an example of the Iraqi ID. One thing I noticed, Jano, is that the Latin letters are much bigger than the Arabic letters. Did this pose a challenge for us in recognizing them?
We had to tune the system a little bit, maybe change the way how, or the ratio, the level of details we look into. So we had maybe to change a little bit the structure of the neural network, and because we are using neural networks and then for recognizing text. So yes, this was an additional challenge on top of it.
On top of this, okay. And then also there's the question of the fonts, right? We know in our Latin characters, we have many different fonts. If you use Microsoft Word, you'll see all the ones that are there. Is this the same in Arabic? And how does this change the recognition of these characters?
And we had to learn this because at the beginning we thought that the situation is very similar to what we have with Latin fonts, but then we find out that it's not so easy to get access to various Arabic fonts used on ID documents. Then even if you have the font, sometimes some characters are missing, some ligatures are not present. And we have a few samples here with missing ligature in the Montserrat Arabic. And this form is correct, but you have to be able to recognize also the form with the ligature in it. So you need your system to be able to see it first. So you need more fonts, you need the font with this ligature in. And also, okay, it's difficult to say because also Latin fonts look, and you have italic, you have differently looking fonts, but in Arabic, I would say that the variability is even greater than in Latin characters. You can see some letters here that look really differently when rendered with different fonts.
Okay. So we needed to adopt our OCR to recognize pretty much all of the fonts that we could reasonably expect to be present on identity cards, right?
Well, typically in an identity card, only one font will be used, but the challenge is to find that font, to be able to generate samples for the neural network so that it's trained to recognize those fonts. Maybe one more slide. Here are real life examples of what we are able to recognize. So you can see three different cards. First one is from Oman, second one is from Saudi Arabia, and the third one is from Egypt, and some samples. So these are low quality texts, but the OCR engine is able to recognize them. Okay, so it's just to give you an idea of how accurate it is and what's the level of degradation it can sustain.
Just to mention maybe to the people viewing, the part in the middle is a box from our document server. And what this means is the text is given on the left, you can see that's extracted, and on the right hand side is the score from 0 to 1 of how confident our algorithm is that it has identified the letters correctly. So we generally set our threshold at something like 0.85 or something like that. So anything above that, you can see most of these are 0.97, 0.95, and 0.88. So this would be considered in the real world acceptable and accurate for use, right?
And we call this confidence of the recognition. We return this score, it's in the SDK, so you can get access to it, and you can set up your workflow. If the confidence is low, maybe a manual verification can be done on top.
So we have the flexibility to adapt to different workflows depending on the use case, right?
I mentioned this briefly. So the way how we train the neural network is we generate a ton of samples, ton of examples. Unlike some of our competitors, we do not require the customer to send us thousands or tens of thousands of documents, of real documents. That would not be, or that would be difficult, but we generate based on 2-3 examples, we find the most similar fonts, and we generate artificial text that then we train our system to recognize.
Okay, so this is quite a benefit for the customer that we just need 1 or 2 samples rather than them having to send over by secure servers some thousands or tens of thousands.
Yes, we need 1 or 2 samples, we need 1 or 2 weeks, and then we are able to add the new document into the system.
Okay.
So we are quite flexible at adding new documents.
Very interesting. Okay, so this is a background of course, how the challenge came to our table and how we overcame it. I'll just mention maybe in the next 2 slides some examples of how customers are using our technology. Specifically, one is in the Middle East, and then I'll go straight into a live demo where I have my Innovatric Arabic language ID card, and I'll try to onboard myself in our demo application, and you can see how it works in real life rather than just on slides. So one of the first customers, probably one of our largest for digital onboarding. They also use our ABIS for real-time identification against large-scale databases, is a consumer finance company called Home Credit. They're actually originally a Czech company. They have operations in 10 countries. As I mentioned at the beginning, in those 10 countries, they have more than 100 million customers. And our success in working with them in the last couple of years is we've helped them to onboard 20 million customers completely remotely without ever meeting them. So Home Credit's business is focused on microloans, microfinance. So they finance mobile devices, they finance consumer electronic items. And we initially rolled out this technology with them in the Philippines, Indonesia, Vietnam, and Kazakhstan. And we plan to roll out in the coming years in all 10 of their key markets. Some of the interesting statistics from their project is that we can set up the system in a way that it's able to manage very high loads. So at peak times, for example, for retail is usually Christmas time, we're able to onboard about 70,000 new customers daily. An average onboarding identity verification session takes for Home Credit, which is quite, I think, an interesting number, is less than 60 seconds. So a customer downloads Home Credit's application, they install it on their phone, and in 60 seconds, they can verify their identity and they can start using their products. So this is really, I think, mission critical for Home Credit. And I think compared to other solutions where identity verification can take minutes or even in some cases 24 hours, this has become their competitive advantage. And not only in the area of convenience, also in terms of fraud rate drop. They've reported back to us that the successful fraud rate has dropped by 90% since they've adopted our technology in 2018. We also have an interesting use case in the Middle East. This is a non-enterprise use case. This is more focused on border control, so a government type system. This is, I think, interesting because of the huge numbers involved. So we have a database of 80 million people, and we're able to identify in real time all of the border crossings in a day, which can be up to 100,000. So again, a mission critical system for a government in the Middle East region, and they're using our technology to help them efficiently manage their borders. So I'll move into the demo now. As I do, I'll just mention that you can also download our demos of this digital onboarding toolkit. You can try it with your Arabic ID or whatever ID you happen to have. We've released a brand new version on Android, which is the one that I'll demonstrate now, but we also do support iOS and also in web. So this is really a cross-platform solution. It's not tied to any particular platform. So just give me a moment and I'll upload or open my visor. So I'll share my mobile device. This is a normal Samsung S20 device. I'll go to the Innovatrix.application. Again, you'll find this, if you just type in Innovatrix into the Play Store, you'll find this on the top of the list. And when I come in, I'm greeted with some scenarios that I can go through. The most relevant one will be full onboarding. So this is full identity verification. We've tried to keep it quite generic, so it could be adapted for banking, could be adapted for visa issuance, could be adapted for passenger registration for border control. Any use case is really within the scope of this. So the demo is quite generic in that regard. When I click on the full onboarding, I'm met by a very simple screen, which gives me some instructions, 3 simple steps. I'll scan my ID document, which I've mentioned is also in Arabic. I'll take a selfie, and then this is an optional feature. It's a liveness check, but this is an active liveness check. Maybe it's important to mention we have 2 approaches for verifying liveness of a person. So-called passive liveness, where we use the same frame that the person takes their selfie with to assign a liveness score. And this method is iBeta level 1 and level 2 accredited. And also then for additional security or for some organizations like to, on purpose, add some friction into the onboarding, you can use active liveness. And this is where a person is challenged to actually complete a task. And I'll show you how our active liveness approach works as I do the onboarding. So once I start, my camera stream begins, and you can see that it's just kind of hovering around my desk. It's looking for the front side of a document. It hasn't detected anything yet. One thing which is quite unique to ours, not very many vendors on the market have this, is fully automated document capture. So the user doesn't need to click any camera icon on their phone. We simply enter the ID document into the frame, and it's able to detect it, it's processing it, and now it's recognized that the document should have a backside, so it gives me an instruction to flip my document, which I will do. I will click continue. Again, position the document within the frame, and it automatically captures when the quality is correct. Within just a second or 2, it's gone to the server and come back. We're using our online version of this. We, of course, can do it fully offline. and it's given me my result. So you can see at the top, it's got the front and back of the ID card normalized and cropped. So that's very useful for storage and for processing later on. And then it's mixing the traditional Latin numbers with the Arabic name, surname, nationality, etc. And you can see, you can tell me if it's been read correctly. It should say Donal Greene. But the indication I have on the right, these green icons, which are 196, etc., these are the confidence scores. So in a usual situation, these confidence scores are extremely high. I'd be very happy to let the customer continue onboarding with these scores. And then at the bottom, we have the parsed area of the machine readable zone of the document. This is there are three types of standardized machine readable zones. This is the 3-line one, which is quite common on ID cards. And it's able to extract all of the data from this. And of course, then we can integrate a cross-check where it will check to make sure the data on the machine readable zone matches up with the data on the data page of the document. So once I've checked all this is correct, I'm able to click continue, where I'll be taken to the selfie step. Again, this is a fully automated feature. So I'm asked to put my face inside the circle. Once that's done, it's captured automatically, and I can start the active liveness check, which I mentioned is one of the optional steps or optional features of DOT. So I click Start Liveness. It tells me watch this object, and my eyes are following the dot as it moves randomly across the screen. And once that's done, I then get my result. So fortunately for me, it's telling me that the onboarding is successful. So in this case, I'd be able to access the service that I'm trying to access immediately without any manual checks. It tells me my age is 31, I'm male, I'm from Innovatric, of course, and the document type is Arabic. The next thing we see are what's called biometric trust factors. The first one of these is, of course, quite a standard one. This is the face match. The number here is 58. Maybe it's worth mentioning that we don't use a normal linear, like a percentage of face match, rather it's a logarithmic score. So most of the distribution of our score is in the first 35 points. So we tell our system integrator partners to set the threshold around 35. Anything above that is considered like 99.9% match, and we allow the onboarding to continue. Here we have the passive liveness frame. It's given me a score of 2,300 and saying that it's passed. Again, our threshold in most cases is 1,500, so it's well above this threshold. And the next trust factor is age validation. So it's able to take my selfie, and it's able to estimate the age based on the selfie. So the age based on my date of birth is quite easy. It's a simple subtraction, is 31 years. And my face analysis tells me that I'm 34. And we usually put a tolerance of 3 to 4 years because the accuracy of this can vary based on the quality of the image. And then the active liveness, again, another important trust factor that you can integrate into your solution. This is checking my eye position in relation to the position of the dot. So if my eyes don't follow the dot correctly, or if I'm using a mask where I can't manipulate the eyes, this will of course give a low trust score, and it won't let me pass through. So you can see in these 4 frames, my eyes are more or less following the position of the dot, and the algorithm is happy that this is a genuine onboarding. We then move down to document trust factors. So the OCR confidence is a combined score of all of these fields from the ID document. So 96, of course, is a very high number on a scale of 1 to 100. We have a document tampering detection feature. So this detects if the text or facial portrait image of the document has been overlaid using some tampering techniques. In this case, it's not detected, so I'm able to continue the onboarding. If I overlaid a different image on top of my own one, it would give me a warning in this case. The color profile check is something we've added recently as well. This checks that the color profile of the document is as expected according to what we've trained. So this kind of looks out for photocopies, black and white copies, or poor quality copies of documents which can be used for fraudulent onboarding. In this case, it's given me a warning. I suspect the reason for that is that there was some glare on the document as I did the onboarding.
The reason is there are no colors in the document. It's almost
it's quite a pale document. Yeah. Yes. Okay. So this is giving me a warning. Of course, the thresholds our integrator partners can work with and find the right balance for the type of onboarding case that they're using. And finally, then we have the machine readable zone checksum. This is just check that the data in my MRZ is matching with the data on my data page of my document. So all of this kind of checks out, and we can then say that the onboarding has been completed successfully. Once that's done, I can go back to the home page, and I can check the next feature and the final feature that I'll show, which is login. Because in many cases, when you onboard a customer once to your application, you want to also authenticate their identity every time they use it or at random intervals throughout them using the application. So this is a typical selfie login scenario. It's very fast. It validates the identity and the liveness of the person, and it then brings them into their, if it was a bank account, they would have their overview of their account dashboard or whatever it might be. So I'll click try to log in. My face is already verified straight away. It happens in a split second, and it's telling me welcome back, and it presents my name. One final feature we have is what's called blurring, or continuous checking for presence of the face. So it tells me to protect my data, the screen will blur. If I look at it, I'll show Jano. Okay. And you can see my name and my other data has been blurred. And once I come back, I can see it again. So again, it's able to always check for the presence of my face. So that's the end of the demo from my side. I'll come back to the slide here just to give you a chance to maybe open your camera and download it on the relevant platform. Again, if you don't manage to do it now, you can go to our website or simply search for Innovatric on Android or iOS stores, and you'll find it there. So I think now, Jan, we might come to the questions and answers.
Maybe what we forgot to mention is that we have been talking a lot about the Arabic script, yes, but we support Chinese characters as well. We support
we've added Bengali recently.
Bengali, yes. So yes, maybe it's worth mentioning.
I think, yeah, that's an important point, Jan.
The technology is quite universal.
It's universal, and every script we've been challenged with, whether, as Jan mentioned, it's the Arabic we've spoken about today, or more recently adding Chinese, Bengali, and other scripts, we really believe that our technology can be adapted for pretty much any script. So if you feel there's a challenging project you have and you'd like to challenge us with supporting a script for it, of course, feel free to reach out to us, and we'd love to take on the challenge and work with you on your identity project. So let's maybe move, Jano, to the questions. I can see them here on my screen. Some have been answered, I think, by our colleagues in the next room. But let's go through them from the top. So Justin Lipschitz asked the question, do we have document liveness detection? I know we've added recently a moire detection for documents. Maybe you could explain a bit about that, Jano, and how that works.
So the idea of the moire detection is if instead of taking a snapshot of a real document, you are just showing a document on a screen, very often you can detect some patterns, moire patterns that appear, and you can give a scoring and reject this kind of document. So yes, we support genuinity check of the documents on top of this, and you mentioned this, we are able to detect tampering with some fields. If you put some overlay on the field, you try to modify your document, we will detect the modification, the spoofing. We are as well checking the consistency of MRZ zone with the fields on the document. So it's another level of how we can check the genuinity of the document. So we do this kind of checks. We are comparing your real age as mentioned on the document with your apparent age from recognized from your photo. So we do this kind of checks to make sure, or to increase to make sure your document basically is valid. And you are the one on the document.
I think that's quite similar to Robert's question. How do we verify the ID document is legitimate? And being honest, having worked in the sales team here, this is the most common question we receive. I would always say to our customers that it first of all depends document by document. On some documents there are more checks you can do. On some there are less. I would always be wary of anybody who says that they can fully authenticate a document using only a smartphone camera. We don't believe that technology or that any technology is there yet. Maybe one thing to mention in terms of document authenticity, which we haven't mentioned yet, is that our digital onboarding toolkit also supports RFID chip reading from documents using the near field communication, yes, NFC from phones. So I think that if you really have a high secure use case and you really need to make sure the document is 100% authentic, the best way to go, if the document supports RFID chips, is to use that function of DOT as an additional trust factor.
Correct. What some customers do, if they want to be really sure it's a genuine document, is they can check it against a government ID.
Yeah.
List of government database with the list of valid IDs. So also this is also a good idea. If in your country such a database exists, it's good to integrate with this service.
Yeah, that actually leads right nicely into Bashar's question. Do we usually integrate our system with the government for further validation? I would say that our approach is as a pure technology vendor. These integrations are usually handled by partners of ours, our integrator partners. But it's very common that we would send some of the data extracted through DOT to a government system via API. It can sometimes be even the photograph of the person, it can be their ID number, it can be a database of stolen or lost IDs. So all of these things are quite open. We can integrate with any database which can receive our data, and it just depends on a use case basis.
What we do, it's an open ecosystem. We provide our customers set of tools so that they can integrate it in their solution and they can develop their own workflow.
Yeah.
So we don't really integrate with government databases, but we let you do it.
We let you do it, exactly, yeah. Justin asks, do we have a browser version of the OCR? I think a very simple answer to that is yes. It does work across all platforms, including browser. And Justin, if you go to...
Not really. Actually, we don't really do in-browser recognition of the characters. Technically speaking, it's possible, but practically speaking, you always want some data to go to the server because you want to store the end result on the server, and also you want to validate. And everybody knows that what happens in the browser can be easily hacked and changed and tampered with.
Maybe I misunderstood the question.
So we do the OCR on the server, and we don't do it. We do the detection of the document in the browser, so that the image does not have to travel to the server. We check whether the photo is there. When you take a selfie, we have an automatic detection of your photo, but we don't do OCR right inside the browser.
Okay, so I probably misunderstood the question. Of course, we can capture the document in the browser, but yes, all of the processing is not done in real time in the browser.
We crop it on the browser and we send it to the server responds, and then we can do something.
Okay, understood. So Emmanuel asked a question, do we have our solution available as an SDK that can be integrated into mobile app, and which other languages do we support? So yes, of course, it's an SDK, a set of mobile components and also server components. You can actually be quite flexible in which parts you want to put on the server and which parts in the mobile application. And I think the follow-up question we probably covered is that what languages do we support? Currently, it's Latin, Cyrillic, Bengali, Arabic, and traditional Chinese. But I think it's feasible that we could add pretty much any additional language.
I would say the question is about computer languages.
Could be also about computer languages. It's interesting how I understand it one way and you understand it a different one, but maybe I've answered my understanding of it. Let's computer languages, let's let you answer that one, Jano.
So we have, I think, okay, I will not list the whole set of computer languages we support, but we have an API. You can find it on GitHub. The documentation is on GitHub, and we have connectors for different languages, and the major ones are, of course, covered.
Mm-hmm. The next question is certainly for you, Jan. I think Saif asks, are we able to read handwritten letters, specifically Iraqi civil affairs ID documents?
As far as I know, we didn't we haven't implemented recognition of handwritten characters, even though technically it's possible. Maybe it's the next challenge.
Mm-hmm. Of course, we always go project by project, right, in terms of which cards we support. So if there's a specific document you have in mind, you can feel free to reach out to us and we can have a look at it and see how technically feasible it is. Kurt asks, can we provide a list of all our currently supported ID cards? Yes, we've actually recently published our developer dashboard for Digital Onboarding Toolkit. This contains all of the product documentation, and it's online. It's, if I'm not mistaken, developers.innovatrix.com/dot. So you can find all the supported documents there. Of course, if the document you have in mind for your project isn't supported, it's really not a big problem for us to take 1 or 2 samples and then provide a library which can support it. So Kurt, feel free to reach out to us on that. I think we're coming to the end of the questions. Roman has responded to a few. Jaume Dubois, hi Jaume, nice to hear from you. Great orientation for Innovatrix. How do we measure and control the accuracy of the OCR?
Well, we have, of course, we have to control the accuracy of the OCR. So we have our own in-house statistical tool, and we are collecting samples of real-life documents. We are annotating them, and then we are comparing the accuracy. We just measure how many fields we have been able to recognize with 100% accuracy.
So we have our own internal testing. Of course, then we can also provide the library to our partner who can then test it on maybe their own data. And I think our approach is always iterative. So if there are some issues that they've noticed, or there's some accuracy on a particular character, we can then do a retraining, and we can then...
Of course, in the real life, there will be surprises. And what happens is, for example, when we integrate the document, we see 2 or 3 samples, but then the same document exists also with different fonts. And it happens in some countries that are not so strict about or more how to agile or
innovative, maybe
yes. Or less controlled environment. So this can happen, of course. So then what is good, we are flexible, and we can add very easily, add the new fonts and recognize them and improve when we get feedback from the customers. So we work with the customers. It's not like we give you the version of the document. If you are not happy, we just abandon you.
Yes.
But we will evolve, we will improve
over time. Yeah.
If we see the situation change. Sometimes over the time, the document gets a little bit modified, gets changed a little bit, so there can be new symbols added. So it's a live process.
Okay. Hatim has a question. Does OCR have difficulty with documents that have both images and text? I think it's actually trained specifically really for that type of document, right?
Not really. So yes, not a real issue. When we do the training, we will of course generate text using various backgrounds. So the neural network is used to this kind of text with various images in the background. So this is not an issue.
Maybe we're coming to the end of the session. There are still a few questions unanswered, and if we haven't got to your question, of course we will reach out to you directly after the session. Maybe we can finish with the question from Ugur. Is the face match against GDPR rules? It's also an interesting question that we receive quite often. I would say, and you can have your say on it if you like also, Jano, that our approach is as a pure technology vendor, right? So we create the tools for our system integrator partners and sometimes our end customers to develop solutions with. And usually the responsibility for regulatory compliance is on their side. I think that a face matching in a real case scenario, it doesn't go against GDPR.
Well, not at all, because we have many customers using it. We have banks using it, and banks in Europe are strictly following GDPR rules. So it's not against GDPR.
Exactly. And of course, the customer is aware of what they're doing. They consent to their processing of data, and they go through the onboarding. So it's not against the GDPR rules in that case. I think some of the last questions are a bit more technical that might be justified an answer by email, things like accuracy ranges and those kind of things. Yeah, there's a question from Food. Are we going to share the recorded presentation? Yes, of course we will. We'll share this with you in probably the next 24 hours after the session. And one final...
There is one interesting question.
Okay.
OCR versus OWR.
Yes, Bashar's question. Okay.
Can you read it?
Since your OCR is, so optical character recognition is optical word recognition, right? how do we handle out of vocabulary words? So like strange surname names.
So the answer is we are not recognizing only known words, but when we are training it, we are recognizing the word, the whole word at the same time. But it's not like we are not able to recognize unknown words or generated words. When you have seen those examples we are training on, those are artificial words. It can be a mix of real words with artificial words, so the system is flexible. There's no issue with this.
Okay. Yeah, and I see that our head of sales, Peter, has come into the room. He was listening to the session and he's come with the books, I promise. This is real thing. This was not scripted, we promise you. Peter's been watching and got annoyed that we called him out on it, I think. So maybe that's a nice way to end the session. It maybe shows that, you know, in any organization, if sales is happy with the outputs of the technical development team, then that's always a good sign. So I think with that, we'll sign off. Yes, maybe one thing to mention before we go, if you're based in the Middle East or if you're planning on attending Seamless, it's going to be amazing to be back at live events for me, the first time in 18 months. Seamless is happening in Dubai at the end of September in the World Trade Center. If you're going to be there, we'll be there too. I'll be there with Peter and the sales team. We're at booth number E10. Please do stop by if you have any questions or want to see more detailed demo. We'll be happy to do that for you. Thanks very much for your time. We filled almost an hour with some also great questions. Anything else that comes to your mind, reach out to us, sales@innovatrix.com. But I think for now, for myself and Jano, that's a wrap, and thank you once again.
Thanks.